The Galactic Council declared war. Humanity answered with Fire Ambassador James Walker, stepped through the massive energy barrier that served as the entrance to the Galactic Council's judgment chamber. The moment his feet touched the crystalline floor, gravity shifted around him in ways that made his stomach lurch. Above, below, and on all sides stretched an impossible structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. Thousands of alien beings filled the curved galleries that spiraled upward into infinity. Some floated in bubbles of methane gas, others clung to magnetic surfaces with metallic claws, and a few existed as pure energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. The air itself hummed with translation fields that converted the cacophony of alien languages into something resembling human speech. At the center of this vast amphitheater, Walker stood alone on a platform that glowed with soft blue light. His simple gray diplomatic suit looked pathetic compared to the exotic forms surrounding him. Many of the aliens had never seen a human before, and he could feel their curiosity pressing against his mind like physical weight. High above, seated on a throne made of living crystal, the Prime Arbiter spoke. Its voice reached every corner of the chamber without need for amplification. "Human representative, you stand before the Galactic Council to answer for your species' crimes against civilized space." Walker kept his expression calm, though his heart pounded. This was the moment Earth had prepared for during 50 years of secret development. Everything depended on how well he played his role. "I am honored to address the Council," Walker replied, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, "though I must confess confusion about these alleged crimes." The Prime Arbiter's crystalline form pulsed with different colors as it accessed data files. "Your species has established colonies in 17 star systems without Council approval. You have developed weapons technology beyond your authorized classification level. Most seriously, you have interfered with the natural development of 3 primitive civilizations." Holographic evidence materialized in the air around Walker. Images of human settlements on distant worlds, blueprints of advanced starships, recordings of human diplomats making contact with alien species that the Council had marked as off-limits. The case against humanity looked overwhelming. Walker studied the evidence with apparent surprise. "These are certainly human activities," he admitted, "but I fail to see how they constitute crimes." A ripple of shock ran through the assembled delegates. The Zephyrian representative, a creature resembling a living tree made of silver, chimed with disbelief. "Human, your species was granted limited exploration rights in designated sectors only. These activities show blatant disregard for Council authority." "That assumes the Council has authority over human actions," Walker replied calmly. "Could you remind me when humanity signed the Galactic Compact?" The Prime Arbiter's colors shifted to deeper shades. "All spacefaring species are bound by Council law upon first contact with galactic civilization." "Interesting interpretation," Walker said. "But according to my records, humanity made first contact with galactic civilization approximately 12,000 years ago." The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Delegates turned to each other, checking their own historical databases. The Prime Arbiter's crystal form darkened with what might have been concern. "That is impossible," declared the Coraxian ambassador, a massive creature covered in armored plates. "Human civilization achieved spaceflight less than 2 centuries ago." Walker smiled and reached into his jacket. Several dozen weapon systems throughout the chamber automatically targeted him, but he simply withdrew a small crystalline device that looked remarkably similar to Council technology. "This data core contains complete records of humanity's first galactic contact," he announced. "I believe your historical archives may be incomplete." The device projected a hologram that filled the air above the chamber floor. It showed a primitive Earth, green and wild, with early human settlements scattered across the continents. But orbiting the planet were sleek spacecraft bearing the insignia of the ancient Vorthan Empire. 12,000 years ago, the Vorthan exploration fleet made contact with early human tribes, Walker explained as the hologram continued. They found humans to be curious, intelligent, and surprisingly adaptable. The Vorthans established hidden observation posts and began a cultural exchange program. The images showed Vorthan scientists working alongside primitive humans, sharing knowledge of agriculture, mathematics, and basic technology. But something was wrong with the timeline. The Vorthan Empire had fallen 8,000 years ago, their civilization consumed by civil war and technological disasters. The Vorthons taught humans many things, Walker continued, including how to hide our true development from species that might see us as a threat. A new set of images appeared, showing human civilization developing along two parallel tracks. The public timeline that galactic civilization knew about, with slow technological progress and limited spaceflight, and a hidden timeline, with advanced technology carefully concealed from outside observation. The Prime Arbiter leaned forward on its crystal throne. You claim humanity has been hiding advanced technology for millennia? Not hiding, Walker corrected. Developing responsibly. The Vorthons warned us about the Council's tendency to suppress emerging species that develop too quickly. They suggested we might want to keep our true capabilities private until we were strong enough to defend ourselves. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If Walker's claims were true, then humanity had been observing galactic civilization for thousands of years, while appearing to be primitive newcomers. These records could be fabricated, the Prime Arbiter said, but its voice lacked conviction. Walker nodded agreeably. They could be. Would you like to examine the archaeological evidence on Earth? Or perhaps review the Vorthon data caches hidden throughout Council space? We've been maintaining their monitoring stations for quite some time now. Several delegates were frantically checking their own databases, searching for any mention of hidden Vorthon installations. The fact that humans knew about secret sites that the Council had never discovered was deeply troubling. Even if this is true, the Caraxian ambassador rumbled, it does not excuse your recent illegal expansions. Illegal according to what authority? Walker asked. If humanity predates the current Council structure, and if we never formally agreed to Council jurisdiction, then by what right do you claim to govern our actions? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Galactic Council's authority had never been questioned so directly. Their power was based on the assumption that all civilizations needed their guidance and protection. Walker gestured to the evidence still floating around him. Those colonies you showed me, they're built on worlds that humanity has been visiting for thousands of years. Those weapons you consider too advanced, they're based on Vorthon designs that predate Council technology. Those primitive species we supposedly interfered with, we've been protecting them from more aggressive civilizations since before the Council knew they existed. The Prime Arbiter's crystal form blazed with angry light. Even if your claims are accurate, your recent actions threaten galactic stability. Your rapid expansion suggests aggressive intentions. Walker's expression hardened slightly. Our expansion suggests that we're tired of pretending to be weak. For thousands of years, humanity has watched the Council manage galactic affairs with mixed results. We've seen promising civilizations crushed under bureaucratic control. We've witnessed the suppression of technological innovation in the name of stability. We've observed the systematic elimination of species that refuse to submit to Council authority. The accusations sent shockwaves through the assembly. Several delegates began protesting, but Walker continued speaking. The Council maintains order through fear and limitation. You keep species dependent on your approval for everything from territorial expansion to technological development. Any civilization that grows too powerful or too independent mysteriously faces catastrophic problems. Walker looked directly at the Prime Arbiter. Humanity has grown beyond your ability to control, and that terrifies you. The question now is what you plan to do about it. The emergency session began 3 hours after Walker's shocking revelations. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with frantic activity as delegates huddled in species-specific groups, their biosignatures flashing with agitation and fear. The elegant crystalline walls that usually maintained calming colors now pulsed with harsh reds and threatening oranges as the chamber's emotional regulators struggled to maintain order. Walker remained on the central platform, seemingly unbothered by the chaos around him. His calm demeanor only increased the tension among the assembled aliens. Some species had never encountered a being that could remain composed while facing the combined judgment of galactic civilization. The Prime Arbiter called for order with a voice that resonated through the quantum substrate of the chamber itself. The Council will address the human claims systematically. Ambassador Walker, you have presented evidence of ancient contact with the Vorthon Empire. Our historical analysts have confirmed that several of your archaeological references check out. A holographic display materialized, showing Vorthon ruins on 17 different worlds, all containing human genetic markers dating back thousands of years. The evidence was undeniable, though many delegates still struggled to accept its implications. However, the Prime Arbiter continued, the existence of ancient contact does not grant humanity unlimited authority to ignore modern galactic law. Walker tilted his head slightly. Define modern Prime Arbiter. The Council has existed for approximately 6,000 years. Human civilization has been spacefaring for 12,000. From our perspective, you're the newcomers. The statement sent ripples of indignation through the assembly. The Crystalline Collective, a group mind that existed across multiple dimensions, spoke with voices like breaking glass. Human arrogance knows no bounds. Age does not grant the right to disrupt galactic order. Disrupt? Walker seemed genuinely puzzled. Prime Arbiter, could you tell the Assembly how many species have gone extinct since the Council was established? The question caught everyone off guard. The Prime Arbiter's crystal form dimmed slightly as it accessed historical databases. Approximately 437 species have become extinct during the Council era. And how many of those extinctions were classified as natural disasters, plague outbreaks, or civil wars that somehow coincidentally occurred shortly after those species refused Council integration? The silence that followed was deafening. Walker had just accused the Galactic Council of systematic genocide, and his calm delivery made the accusation even more chilling. You're suggesting the Council deliberately eliminates non-compliant species? The Prime Arbiter's voice carried dangerous undertones. I'm stating it as fact, Walker replied. Humanity has been observing your methods for thousands of years. The pattern is consistent and well documented. Any civilization that develops advanced technology independently, refuses Council oversight, or threatens established power structures, faces mysterious catastrophes within a few decades. New holographic displays appeared around Walker, showing detailed records of extinct civilizations. The Nexarid Empire, wiped out by a plague that specifically targeted their unique physiology. The Quantum Builders destroyed when their home system's star went supernova, despite being astronomically young. The Infinite Wanderers, eliminated when their nomadic fleets encountered coordinated attacks by multiple species that had never cooperated before. In each case, Walker continued, the extinction event served Council interests by removing a potential challenge to established order. The surviving records show clear evidence of artificial manipulation. The Caraxian ambassador rose from his massive throne, his armored plates clanking with agitation. These are serious accusations, human. Do you have proof of Council involvement? Walker smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber, he looked genuinely dangerous. I have something better than proof. I have witnesses. The air in the chamber shimmered and new figures began materializing on the platform beside Walker. The first to appear was clearly not human despite its humanoid shape. Its skin had a metallic sheen, and its eyes glowed with inner light. Several delegates recognized it immediately. Impossible, whispered the Etherian representative. The Nexarid species is extinct. Not quite, Walker replied. Humanity rescued approximately 50,000 Nexarid survivors before their homeworld was sterilized. They've been living in our hidden settlements for the past 3,000 years. More figures appeared, a being of living crystal that resembled the Quantum Builders, a creature of pure energy that matched descriptions of the Infinite Wanderers, and dozens of other entities representing species that official records claimed were extinct. The chamber erupted in pandemonium. Delegates shouted accusations, demanded explanations, and called for immediate verification of Walker's claims. The Prime Arbiter's crystal form blazed with intense light as it struggled to process the implications. You've been harboring extinct species for millennia. The Prime Arbiter's voice carried notes of both amazement and horror. We've been providing sanctuary to survivors of Council-sponsored genocides, Walker corrected. When the pattern became clear, humanity established a rescue protocol. Every time the Council targets a species for elimination, we evacuate as many survivors as possible. One of the rescued beings stepped forward. Its voice carried harmonics that identified it as a former member of the Harmony Singers, a species that had supposedly destroyed itself in religious warfare 2,000 years ago. The Council fears what it cannot control, the being said. Any species that develops too quickly, thinks too differently, or refuses integration becomes a target. Humanity offered us protection when our own government was infiltrated and turned against us. The revelations were reshaping everyone's understanding of galactic history. Species that had trusted the Council's protection were now wondering if they were actually living under a carefully disguised tyranny. The Prime Arbiter attempted to regain control of the situation. Even if these accusations have merit, they do not excuse humanity's recent aggressive expansion. Walker laughed, a sound that somehow carried both amusement and menace. Aggressive expansion? Prime Arbiter. Humanity currently has permanent populations on over 8,000 worlds. We've established trade relationships with 600 species that officially don't exist. Our exploration fleets have mapped regions of space that your charts still mark as unknown. The numbers were staggering. The Council's own record showed human presence on less than 50 worlds, all in designated frontier sectors. You're claiming to have a secret empire spanning thousands of worlds? The Crystalline Collective's voice cracked with disbelief. Not secret, Walker replied. Hidden. There's a difference. We haven't been skulking in shadows. We've been operating in dimensions that your technology can't detect. A new holographic display showed the galaxy as the Council knew it, with clearly marked territories and established trade routes. Then the image shifted to show the same region from humanity's perspective. The empty space between star systems was filled with structures, settlements, and transportation networks that existed in folded spacetime. Your expansion maps show human presence in outer rim territories, Walker explained. But those are just our public colonies, the ones we let you see. Our actual civilization operates in parallel dimensional space where Council sensors can't detect us. The implications were terrifying. If Walker was telling the truth, then humanity had been building a vast interstellar empire right under the Council's nose, while appearing to be a minor frontier species. How long? The Prime Arbiter asked quietly. We began serious construction projects about 4,000 years ago, Walker replied. Around the time we realized the Council wasn't the benevolent organization it claimed to be. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the magnitude of their situation. They had been debating how to handle a troublesome young species, only to discover that they were facing an ancient civilization with capabilities that dwarfed their own. What do you want from us? The Prime Arbiter finally asked. Walker's expression hardened. We want you to stop pretending you have authority over humanity. We want an end to the systematic elimination of independent species, and we want recognition that the galaxy is big enough for civilizations that don't need your permission to exist. The ultimatum hung in the air like a weapon waiting to fire. The Prime Arbiter's crystal form pulsed with dangerous energy as it considered Walker's ultimatum. Around the chamber, delegates whispered frantically among themselves, their biosignatures painting the walls with colors of fear, anger, and desperate calculation. The revelation that humanity had been operating a hidden civilization for millennia had shattered their understanding of galactic power structures. Ambassador Walker, the Prime Arbiter said slowly, your demands amount to a complete restructuring of galactic civilization. The Council cannot simply abandon 6,000 years of established order based on threats from a single species. Walker's expression remained calm, but something shifted in his posture that made several nearby delegates step back. Prime Arbiter, I haven't made any threats. I've simply informed you of realities that you've been blind to for thousands of years. The Caraxian ambassador slammed one massive fist against his throne's armrest. This is intolerable. One species cannot dictate terms to the entire galaxy. You're absolutely right, Walker agreed. One species cannot and should not have that kind of power. That's precisely why the Council system needs to change. Before anyone could respond, the chamber's emergency alerts began screaming. Holographic displays materialized throughout the space, showing real-time tactical data from across Council territory. Fleet Admiral Nex of the Council Defense Force appeared as a quantum projection, his 6 arms gesticulating wildly. Prime Arbiter, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout Council space. Unknown structures are materializing in 17 star systems simultaneously. The tactical displays showed impossible images. Massive installations were phasing into visible reality around inhabited worlds, structures that dwarfed anything in the Council's engineering databases. They appeared to be emerging from folded space itself, as if entire cities had been hidden in parallel dimensions and were now choosing to reveal themselves. Those are our monitoring stations, Walker explained casually. We've been maintaining observation posts throughout Council territory for the past 4,000 years. Recent events have made continued secrecy unnecessary. The fleet admiral's projection flickered with agitation. The energy outputs from these stations exceed our theoretical maximums. Some of them appear to be larger than our planetary defense grids. They're not weapons platforms, Walker assured him. They're research facilities, refugee centers, and dimensional anchors that allow us to maintain our parallel infrastructure. Though I suppose they could be repurposed if necessary. The casual mention of repurposing sent waves of alarm through the assembly. The Etherian representative's gaseous form shifted to deep purple, a color that indicated extreme distress among her species. "You've been spying on us for millennia?" she accused. "We've been protecting you," Walker corrected. "Those monitoring stations have prevented 14 major catastrophes in the past 1,000 years alone. Solar flares that would have sterilized inhabited worlds, asteroid impacts that could have caused mass extinctions, and several attempts by hostile species to introduce biological weapons into Council space. New data began flowing across the tactical displays, showing intervention records that painted a very different picture of recent galactic history. The Zephyrian plague outbreak that had mysteriously ended just before it reached pandemic levels. The rogue asteroid that had been headed directly for the Crystalline Collective's home system, before inexplicably changing course. The Caraxian Civil War that had suddenly ceased when both sides' weapons malfunctioned simultaneously. Every time, Walker continued, humanity stepped in to prevent disasters that would have destabilized galactic civilization. We did it quietly without taking credit, because we believed the Council would eventually evolve beyond its current limitations. Fleet Admiral Nex was frantically coordinating with his tactical staff. "Prime Arbiter, our sensor networks are detecting additional anomalies. There appear to be structures existing in folded space-time throughout our territory. The scope is unprecedented," Walker nodded approvingly. "The Admiral is beginning to grasp the situation. Humanity doesn't just have hidden colonies. We have hidden infrastructure that spans the entire galaxy. Transportation networks, communication arrays, manufacturing facilities, research installations, all existing in parallel dimensional space where your technology couldn't detect them." The Prime Arbiter leaned forward on its crystal throne. "How is such construction possible? The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of entire star systems." "That assumes you're using conventional energy sources," Walker replied. "When you learn to manipulate dimensional barriers, you gain access to infinite energy potential. The universe contains far more power than most species realize." To demonstrate his point, Walker gestured toward one of the chamber's massive support pillars. The crystalline structure began to glow with soft light that somehow seemed to come from within its atomic structure. The pillar wasn't being heated or energized from outside. Its very matter was being convinced to release energy that had always been there. "Matter-energy conversion at the quantum level," Walker explained as delegates stared in amazement. "Every atom contains tremendous power. Most species learn to split atoms for weapons or fuse them for fuel. We learn to persuade matter to share its energy willingly. The demonstration was both beautiful and terrifying. If humanity could manipulate matter at that fundamental level, then their technological capabilities were beyond anything the Council had imagined." Fleet Admiral Nex's projection was becoming increasingly agitated. "Prime Arbiter, we're receiving reports from across Council space. The human installations are actively scanning our military facilities. They appear to have detailed intelligence on every defensive position, every fleet deployment, every classified research project." "Of course we do," Walker said matter-of-factly. "We've been observing your activities for thousands of years. Your security measures are designed to prevent detection by conventional sensors and infiltration by physical agents. They're completely ineffective against observers operating from parallel dimensions." The implications were staggering. Every Council secret, every military plan, every confidential diplomatic negotiation had potentially been monitored by humanity. The balance of power wasn't just shifted, it had never existed in the first place. The Crystalline Collective spoke with voices like grinding stone. "This is an act of war. Your species has violated every principle of interstellar sovereignty." Walker's expression hardened. "Have we? Let me ask you something. When your species was developing faster than light travel 8,000 years ago, who intervened to prevent your experimental drives from creating a cascading dimensional collapse that would have destroyed 12 star systems?" The Collective's harmonic voices fell silent. That incident was classified at the highest levels of their government. When the Etherian Empire's expansion brought them into conflict with the Nexus builders 3,000 years ago, who secretly mediated the territorial dispute to prevent a war that would have devastated both civilizations, the Etherian representative's gaseous form shifted to colors of shocked recognition. When the Caraxian plague threatened to spread beyond your species' immune systems 1,800 years ago, who developed the cure and anonymously transmitted it to your medical researchers? One by one, Walker was revealing humanity's hidden interventions in galactic history. Every major crisis that had been mysteriously resolved, every catastrophe that had been narrowly averted, every breakthrough that had come at precisely the right moment. For thousands of years, Walker continued, humanity has been the galaxy's immune system, quietly preventing disasters and maintaining stability, while you've been focused on politics and territorial disputes. The Prime Arbiter's crystal form had dimmed to barely visible levels. Why reveal this now? Why abandon your policy of secret intervention? Walker's smile was sad rather than threatening. Because the Council has become the very thing it was created to prevent. You've evolved from galactic peacekeepers into galactic tyrants. The systematic elimination of independent species has accelerated, and we can no longer stand by and watch you destroy the diversity that makes galactic civilization worth preserving. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the full scope of the situation became clear. Humanity wasn't demanding recognition as an equal power. They were revealing that they had always been the dominant power, working behind the scenes to keep galactic civilization functioning. The question now, Walker said quietly, is whether the Council will adapt to this new reality or force us to become more direct in our interventions. The Prime Arbiter rose from its crystal throne, its form blazing with light that forced many delegates to shield their eyes. The chamber's emotional regulators finally gave up trying to maintain harmony, and the crystalline walls erupted in chaotic patterns of red, orange, and violent purple. Enough, the Prime Arbiter thundered, its voice resonating through dimensions that most species couldn't perceive. The Galactic Council will not be intimidated by elaborate deceptions and technological theater. Humanity's claims of ancient civilization and hidden interventions are nothing more than sophisticated propaganda designed to justify their recent aggressive actions. Walker's expression didn't change, but the rescued survivors standing beside him began to emit low harmonics that filled the chamber with an unsettling resonance. The sound wasn't threatening, but it carried undertones that suggested vast patience finally reaching its limits. Prime Arbiter, Walker said calmly, I understand that accepting these revelations challenges everything you believe about galactic civilization. But denial won't change the facts. Fleet Admiral Nex's projection flickered as new reports poured in from across Council space. Prime Arbiter, the situation is escalating. Our military installations are detecting active scanning from the human facilities. It appears they're conducting detailed analysis of our defensive capabilities. Analysis completed, Walker confirmed. Your current military infrastructure could be neutralized within approximately 17 minutes if we chose to act. But destruction has never been our preference. The casual dismissal of Council military might send shockwaves through the assembly. These weren't the words of a desperate species making empty threats. They carried the confidence of absolute superiority. The Caraxian ambassador's armored plates clanked as he shifted position. You expect us to simply surrender galactic governance to a species that operates in shadows and makes claims we cannot verify? Not surrender, Walker replied, evolve. The current system concentrates too much power in too few hands. Real galactic civilization requires diversity, independence, and cooperation rather than submission to central authority. The Prime Arbiter's light intensified further. The Council system has maintained galactic peace for 6,000 years. Your proposals would lead to chaos and conflict. Would they? Walker gestured, and new holographic displays materialized showing detailed analyses of galactic conflicts over the past 6 millennia. Your records show 437 extinct species. But they fail to mention the 3,000 species that never achieved spaceflight, because Council policies prevented their natural development. The data was damning. Primitive species that had been quarantined for their own protection had remained primitive for thousands of years, their development artificially stunted by Council interference. Advanced species that refused integration had faced mysterious setbacks that prevented them from achieving their potential. The Council hasn't maintained peace, Walker continued, It's maintained stagnation. Galactic civilization has been artificially frozen at a level that preserves Council dominance while preventing the natural evolution of younger species. The Etherian representatives' gaseous form shifted through multiple colors of distress. These are serious accusations. Do you have evidence of deliberate development suppression? I have documentation of every intervention, Walker replied. Primitive species provided with just enough technology to remain dependent on Council guidance. Advanced research projects mysteriously encountering insurmountable obstacles when they threaten established power structures. Promising young civilizations experiencing convenient disasters when their growth rates exceed acceptable parameters. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Thousands of interventions designed not to help species develop, but to keep them controllable. Fleet Admiral Nex was coordinating frantically with his staff when new alarms began screaming throughout the chamber. Prime Arbiter, we're detecting massive energy buildups in 7 star systems. The readings suggest controlled stellar manipulation on an unprecedented scale. Walker nodded approvingly. Humanity has decided that a demonstration might be more convincing than continued discussion. The tactical displays shifted to show impossible images. In the Alderaan system, home to one of the Council's primary military academies, the local star was beginning to shed its outer layers in precisely controlled solar flares. But instead of the random destruction that should have followed, the stellar energy was being directed and shaped by invisible forces. What you're observing, Walker explained, is precision stellar engineering. We're not destroying anything. We're using the star itself as a tool to remove artificial structures while leaving natural worlds completely unharmed. The Academy installations, the defensive platforms, the massive shipyard complexes that had taken centuries to build, were being systematically vaporized by directed stellar fire. But the inhabited planets below remained untouched, protected by energy fields that somehow deflected stellar radiation while allowing normal sunlight to pass through. Impossible, breathed the Prime Arbiter. No species has the technology to control stellar output with that precision. Most species don't, Walker agreed. But when you've been engineering dimensional barriers for 4,000 years, manipulating stellar physics becomes a matter of applied mathematics. Similar events were occurring in 6 other systems across Council space. Military installations were being eliminated with surgical precision, while civilian populations remained completely safe. The message was clear. Humanity could destroy Council military power at will while ensuring that no innocent lives were lost. The crystalline collective spoke with voices that cracked like breaking stone. This is an act of war. We demand immediate cessation of hostile activities. These aren't hostile activities, Walker corrected. They're preventive measures. Our analysis indicates that Council military forces were preparing to launch coordinated strikes against human settlements within the next 48 hours. We're simply removing that capability before it can be used. Fleet Admiral Nex's projection was flickering with barely controlled panic. How could you know our operational plans? Those orders were classified at the highest levels. Walker smiled sadly. Admiral, we've been monitoring Council communications from parallel dimensions for thousands of years. Your encryption methods are designed to prevent interception by conventional means. They're useless against observers who exist partially outside normal spacetime. The reality of humanity's surveillance capabilities was finally sinking in. Every secret, every plan, every private conversation had potentially been observed by beings operating from invisible dimensions. This is intolerable, the Prime Arbiter declared. The Council cannot govern under constant observation by a hostile power. Then perhaps, Walker suggested, the Council should consider whether it needs to govern at all. The statement hung in the air like a challenge to the very foundations of galactic civilization. What you're witnessing, Walker continued, is not an attack but a transition. Humanity is no longer willing to operate exclusively from the shadows. We're revealing ourselves because the galaxy needs to understand that real progress requires freedom from centralized control. The tactical displays were showing the aftermath of the stellar interventions. Council military infrastructure was gone, but civilian facilities remained untouched. Trade continued normally, communication networks functioned perfectly, and ordinary citizens went about their daily lives completely, unaware that their government's military power had just been eliminated. You've crippled our Ability to maintain order, the prime arbiter. Accused, we've eliminated your ability to suppress independent development. Walker corrected. Order doesn't require military dominance. It requires mutual respect and cooperation. The rescued survivors stepped forward, their combined voices creating harmonics that resonated through the chamber's quantum substrate. The galaxy contains infinite potential, they said in unison. But that potential can only be realized when species are free to develop according to their own nature, rather than according to someone else's plans. Walker nodded toward his companions. These beings represent the diversity that the Council system has been systematically eliminating. They're proof that the galaxy is capable of supporting multiple approaches to civilization and development. The Prime Arbiter's crystal form began to dim as the magnitude of the situation became clear. What happens now? Walker's expression softened slightly. Now we begin the process of building a truly galactic civilization, one based on cooperation rather than domination, diversity rather than conformity, and freedom rather than control. The war had begun not with violence, but with the revelation that it had already been won thousands of years ago. 6 months had passed since the day of revelation, as historians were already calling it. The Galactic Council chamber looked remarkably different now, though the changes were subtle rather than dramatic. The crystalline walls still rose into impossible heights, and the curved galleries still held thousands of delegates, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Where once there had been rigid hierarchies and formal protocols, now there was something resembling actual discussion. The Prime Arbiter no longer sat alone on its elevated crystal throne. Instead, it had descended to a platform that put it on the same level as other speakers. The change was symbolic but significant. Walker stood at the center of the chamber once again, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him stood representatives of dozens of species that official records had claimed were extinct. Their presence served as a constant reminder of how much galactic history had been hidden or distorted. The transition accords are now complete, announced Director Alex Morgan, humanity's new representative for galactic affairs. Walker had returned to Earth to help coordinate the massive changes taking place throughout human space. All Council member species have agreed to the new framework for interstellar cooperation. The accords represented the most significant shift in galactic governance in 6,000 years. Instead of centralized control through the Council, the new system established autonomous zones where different species could develop according to their own preferences, while maintaining cooperative relationships for trade, research, and mutual defense. The Prime Arbiter's crystal form pulsed with what might have been relief. The transition has proceeded more smoothly than many of us anticipated. The predicted chaos and conflict have not materialized. That's because chaos was never the natural result of freedom, Morgan replied. It was the artificial result of suppression. When species are allowed to develop naturally, they tend to find ways to coexist rather than destroy each other. The evidence supported his statement. In the 6 months since Council military power had been eliminated, galactic civilization had not collapsed into warfare. Instead, there had been an explosion of innovation, cultural exchange, and cooperative ventures that the old system had been preventing. Fleet Admiral Nex, whose position had been transformed from military commander to coordinator of interspecies security cooperation, provided the latest status report. Crime rates in most sectors have actually decreased since the transition began. Without artificial restrictions on development and trade, many of the conflicts that required military intervention have simply evaporated. The rescued survivor representing the Harmony Singers stepped forward. Our species spent 2,000 years in hiding, preserving knowledge and culture that we thought had been lost forever. Now we're sharing that knowledge with young civilizations that can benefit from our experiences. Similar stories were being repeated throughout the galaxy. The quantum builders had emerged from their hidden sanctuaries to help other species develop stable, faster-than-light technology. The infinite wanderers were teaching nomadic species how to navigate safely through dangerous regions of space. The extinct civilizations were proving to be humanity's greatest allies in building the new galactic order. There is one concern, the Etherian representative interjected, her gaseous form shifting to colors of mild anxiety. The human monitoring networks continue to operate throughout our territories. While we appreciate the protective benefits, some species are uncomfortable with constant observation. Morgan nodded, understanding. That's why we're implementing the transparency protocol. All monitoring data collected by human installations will be shared with local governments on a real-time basis. You'll know exactly what we're observing and why. The offer was unprecedented in galactic politics. No species had ever volunteered to share intelligence-gathering capabilities with potential rivals. Furthermore, Morgan continued, any species that prefers complete privacy can request that monitoring stations in their territory be deactivated. We'll respect that choice, though we reserve the right to withdraw other protective services if our ability to prevent disasters is compromised. The Caraxian ambassador, whose armor now bore symbols of cooperation rather than military rank, rumbled his approval. This level of openness demonstrates genuine commitment to the new cooperative framework. But not all the changes had been easy to accept. Several species had initially resisted the new order, and their responses had required careful handling. What about the Dominion Collective? Asked the Crystalline Collective, their harmonic voices carrying undertones of concern. They've refused all cooperation and have withdrawn to their core territories. The Dominion Collective had been the Council's most militaristic member species, and they had not adapted well to the elimination of their power projection capabilities. Their response had been to retreat into isolation and begin developing new weapon systems designed specifically to counter human technology. We're monitoring their activities, Morgan admitted. Their weapons research is progressing along predictable lines, but they're making a fundamental error in their assumptions about human capabilities. A new holographic display materialized, showing the Dominion's primary research facilities. The installations were impressive by conventional standards, but they were all operating in normal spacetime using traditional physics. They're trying to build weapons that can affect targets in parallel dimensions, Morgan explained, but they're approaching the problem as an engineering challenge rather than a consciousness development issue. The distinction was crucial. Humanity's dimensional manipulation abilities weren't based purely on technology. They were the result of expanded awareness that allowed conscious beings to perceive and interact with multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Consciousness development, the Prime Arbiter asked with curiosity rather than concern. The ability to exist partially outside normal spacetime requires a fundamental shift in how a species understands the nature of reality, Morgan explained. It's not something that can be achieved through conventional scientific research alone. Walker's voice came through the chamber's communication system from Earth. The Dominion is welcome to continue their research. When they're ready to expand their understanding beyond purely material approaches, we'll be happy to share what we've learned. The offer was both generous and confident. Humanity wasn't worried about other species developing similar capabilities because they understood that such development required cooperation and wisdom, rather than just technological advancement. The bigger question, Walker continued, is what we all want to build together. The old system preserved stability through stagnation. The new system offers growth through cooperation. But growth requires choices about direction and priorities. Several new projects were already under development throughout the galaxy. Joint research initiatives were exploring possibilities that had been forbidden under the old restrictions. Cultural exchange programs were revitalizing civilizations that had been artificially isolated. Most significantly, young species were being allowed to develop their full potential rather than being constrained by artificial limitations. The preliminary results are remarkable, reported Dr. Lynn Foster, Humanities Coordinator for Developmental Cooperation. Species that were classified as having limited potential under the old system are achieving breakthroughs that surprise everyone. The examples were numerous and encouraging. The Pastoral Federation, considered a simple agricultural civilization for 2,000 years, had developed biotechnology that could terraform dead worlds in decades rather than centuries. The wandering tribes, dismissed as primitive nomads, had created transportation networks that connected distant regions of the galaxy more efficiently than any previous system. Perhaps most importantly, Morgan added, we're seeing the emergence of entirely new forms of cooperation. Species are combining their unique capabilities to achieve goals that none of them could accomplish alone. The chamber fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications. The galaxy was being transformed not through conquest or domination, but through the liberation of potential that had always existed, but had been suppressed by fear and control. The question now, Morgan concluded, is not whether the new system will work, but how far it will take us. For the first time in galactic history, we're free to discover what civilizations can become when they're allowed to grow without artificial limits. The war had been won not through violence, but through the revelation that there had never been any real reason to fight. The galaxy was vast enough for infinite diversity, and cooperation was more powerful than control. In the end, humanity had answered the Council's declaration of war with something far more devastating than fire. They had answered with freedom.